When you're building something as unique as this and with a cab as small as this, sometimes you have to make a choice between, do I put the cage where I need it so I have enough like foot room, or do I put the door where I need it? And unfortunately for the door, the cage won this one. Matt has been working on the doors. He is making some custom hinges that will make it to where we can just pull the, go ahead and show them the action. So we're gonna be able to just pull the doors on and off real easy, no nuts, no bolts. That'll be easy, but what is not easy is fitting this door up to this aftermarket aluminum body. These Samurai doors do not fit right. So Matt is doing his best to get everything presentable. I'm so glad we went with the camo wrap so it can hide some of these shoddy body lines, but in the summertime, you won't see doors on it. In the wintertime, the doors will be on the entire winter. So we have to have doors. Snow season up here is intense, and I don't want to be in the middle of a blizzard with just heated seats. So we need to have some sort of coverage. While he's doing that, I'm gonna clean off this table and I'm gonna get started on the electrical. Every time that I scratch build a new wire harness for something, I swear that the next time that I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna be more organized. So this TMR rack is an attempt to do that. I wanna make sure that I don't have to dig through a bin like I usually do to find red 14 gauge wire. I can just look at the rack, I can pull it off the spool, and then it's so much easier to see the spool, so I can like write down as I'm going, just, you know, I'm getting low, order some more. Outside of that, building this harness, I'm gonna start with the battery, and I like to make sure that these kinds of connections are as waterproof as possible, and I wanna make them as insulated as possible. So I go a little bit over the top. I use a hot glue gun to seal off anything that I think needs to be sealed in order to make sure that whenever I use my shrink wrap, it actually like shrinks down onto something round and it's easy for it to have a weather tight connection. Since these leads come from a battery on the axle into the vehicle, I want to triple insulate them. So we've got the insulation that came on the wire, we've got a braided insulation that's going to go over that, and then I use what we call wire loom, what some people call split conduit, as the final layer of protection on both of these leads going into the cab. Instead of locating and buying new Samurai door panels, we're just going to make our own out of aluminum. So Matt is getting working on that. It's going to take some serious time, but it'll be worth it when it's all said and done. It's just going to look utilitarian, and I don't know, I might even wrap them. This is the part in the build where I think it's going to get the most complicated, because the Samurai body is very small. We've already stuffed it with tons of stuff, and now we have to finish stuffing it with stuff. We've got two giant relay boxes. Well, this isn't exactly giant, but this one certainly is. In order to control everything, all the different electronic gizmos and gadgets throughout the vehicle, and I'm having a hard time committing like places to put these. We might put them behind the dash, but that means that I need to switch gears and start putting in a whole bunch of our dash stuff, getting the dash laid out, because once we figure out how much space all the dash stuff is going to take up, I can figure out if I can build some sort of a plate or something to maybe mount these relay boxes too. Out of the way, and then I hate having to bounce around from task to task at the end of a build like this, but these door panels are such a great example as to why I do. We get the door panels 99% of the way done, and then we realize that if we order a couple of new Suzuki Samurai plastic pieces to go on the inside of the door, then whenever we assemble, it's just going to look so much better and more complete. So this is going to get tabled and just kind of sit aside while we wait for parts, and then we'll get started on other things. This dash is another good example. I didn't exactly know where I was gonna be putting all the switches and whatnot, and if I was gonna use three-way switches on some and two on other. But as I'm assembling and I start to work out all those details, I can put everything that I have now on it, and then I can order whatever I'm gonna need in order to finish the way that I think is gonna be best in the long run. One of the smaller items on the list, but I think was really important, is to add some sort of a connection point between the middle of our cage to the middle of this front frame section, like this front chassis section. I want to have a lot of rigidity up here because, you can't, there's certain things you just can't fix on the trail, and your front end ripping off because of, you've been beating it with your limit straps and with your bump stops over like thousands of miles, and then you do like a couple hard winch pulls and you start to tweak a bunch of that up there. I mean, there's no going back from that. So this is a little extra weight, but it's a whole lot of extra strength, and I think that it's worth the extra time to make sure that from the nose to the tail of the Samurai, everything is joined together and has lots of resistance to leverage. The accelerator pedal that's in the 2006 Jetta, which is where this engine came from, is interesting because it's floor mounted, whereas like most of your other TDIs before this generation was always like it would hang down like a traditional pedal. Well, traditional depending on how far back you go back. If you go back to the air-cooled stuff, all those old V-dubs were floor mounted too. But in any case, I've already made a bracket that fits this bizarre pedal that's in the TJ, and with the new motor that's going to go in the TJ, it's not going to be using the same style pedal. So this is a great opportunity to just recycle a part off of another project and make it to where this is a really easy install for me. The dies aren't really made exactly. And just like that, a strange, one-of-a-kind intake doodad is born. Check that out. Nice and simple. That was an easy one. I figure while I'm waiting on a bunch of this electrical stuff to show up, I'm very excited to get started in the electrical system, but I want to have most of what I need before I get going on this. So I'm hammering out some of the weird plumbing issues that we have here, and this one is the biggest of them all. This goes in the back of the head, and this is in between the head and the firewall. This is kind of the base of what I think I'm going to use to solve it. I had Matt cut some of this stuff out yesterday, so this weekend I can play around and see what I can make work, but we have a strange temperature probe. We have pipes going in the wrong directions. This is not going to work for so many reasons, so I'm going to try to make something that's really slim, something that puts all of our cooling going in the correct directions, and hopefully something that's going to make it to where next week we can fill this with coolant and test for leaks. This temperature sensor is a humongous problem. It's not threaded, right? So if it was threaded, we could just cut threads into a piece of aluminum. We could take that onto some sort of a flange, whatever we needed to do. But this has got like a O-ring fitment, so we need this to fit really tight, but not so tight that it cuts the O-ring every time you install it. And I had a couple of different ideas for like some different tube. I tried some different size tubes, and nothing really seemed like it would be hardy enough for this job, so I'm gonna wing it. I've got some scrap aluminum in here. I don't want to have to go buy like a chunk of billet or anything, and I don't have a mill. So with a TIG welder, a bunch of different drill bits, and some basic shaping tools, I'm gonna see if I can put together some sort of a solve for this funky shaped cooling flange that's on the back of the head. Something else that I want to fix while we're building this flange is I want to redirect where the radiator hose is going to go, because on this engine it was mounted sideways in the Jetta that it came out of, and now it's mounted forward to back. So for a radiator to be on the side of your engine instead of on the front, you need to like change where the coolant comes out. So I need coolant to come out on the driver's side of the engine, which it does, and then I need coolant to like return on the passenger side in order to make radiator hose routing practical at all. And then I also want to design this in a way that it flows really well, so I'm going to really take my time and shape the inside of this flange just to make it to where coolant can pass through and it doesn't do anything weird because it just hits like a dead end. I think I'm gonna have Matt get started installing these this morning. We have a boatload of work to do, but we're also like right at the end of being able to get this thing at least running and driving. If I can get it going in the next 3 weeks, then that would mean that I could bring it to King of the Hammers, which I would love to do. Otherwise, I'll be going down there with my Tacoma anyway. But we've got some big obstacles ahead of us. I need to do some plasti welding. I don't know if we'll get to this week, we'll see. I really want to turn this hood into a functional hood scoop, because right now it's got a hood scoop that gives us space for the motor, but it would be awesome if we could like somehow make a duct that would feed cool air into our air box. We'll see where we get. Right now, I've got to make a list of what needs to be done and then decide what we should do so we can get ahead of ordering parts. And at the end of this, we're not like a week out on the one last thing we need to get it going. While Matt was buttoning up some of the odds and ends with these door panels, getting them mounted, I decided to get going on the intake. This is going to be a big job, and I had a couple of different strategies in mind. Plan A was to build an air box that had a couple different, like, not necessarily chambers, but it had a way of separating water from air a little bit better. So if I am like pulling in a whole bunch of like rain, it's not going to go right on the filter. I really want to make this to where I don't have to service the filter constantly like I did on my last TDI swap. But unfortunately, the panel filter idea fell through. So then I had to go to a cone filter, and then the placement of where I wanted to put the cone filter fell through with the plastic box. There's just not enough space for me to make this sweet setup that I wanted to do. So now we're going to have to build something really high just to get it out of the engine bay, just because there's just not a lot of room in there. And it's going to be pulling air directly out of the hood scoop, which is something I didn't want, meaning that I didn't want it to basically be like in there. I wanted there to be an opportunity to separate any like rainwater that came in, but that's just not going to happen for this one. There's not enough space for me to be picky, so we're going to put the air filter where it fits instead of where I want it. But the good news is I bought 2 of these air filters, so I'll just bring a spare with me on long trips, and then I can change it on the trail if it gets nasty really fast. I just did a lot of work really, really fast. So to get everybody up to speed, air is being drawn in through our air filter, which again, I'm heartbroken about this, but it is gonna work. It goes past our mass airflow sensor, which meters the amount of air that's coming in. It then gets fed into the intake side of our turbo. That turbo is being spun from the exhaust, which is then pressurizing the air into our charge pipes. So this is essentially negative pressure because there's always going to be a little bit
of negative pressure whenever you have an air filter, because this isn't just pulling directly from atmosphere. And then we're going to have positive pressure here. The positive pressure is then going to be fed into this intercooler, which is then cooling down that air charge, and then it gets carried. This is now the cold side of the intercooler, and then it feeds the cooled air into our intake manifold. Now, the reason that we want this is because we can take an engine that is only 1.9 liters and we can make it perform like an engine that is far greater displacement. So there's a saying, there's no replacement for displacement. There's actually a lot of replacements for displacement. Turbos, superchargers, nitrous, all replacements for displacement, because the fact that we can shove more air in there, we are giving the engine the ability to then digest more fuel, because once you add more air, you can then match it with more fuel, and now you're gonna make more power, because more power comes from more fuel. So anyway, that's the long and short of how this works. Now, the air-to-water intercooler, I know that there's still a lot of folks that are not familiar with how these work. So we're able to package an intercooler into an engine bay that is like almost impossible to package one, because we have a liquid-cooled intercooler. So this weird pump right here, this is a bilge pump. Those of you that have, like, you know, bass trackers and stuff, you have seen these. These are used a lot with air-to-water intercoolers because they have the ability to like run dry-ish, and they're really inexpensive, and you can buy them at Walmart. So now that I have this piped in here, I mean, I can just unscrew the pump part, throw it away if it goes bad, and then just get a new one at you know, a fishing store or Walmart or whatever. And now I have a replacement pump, which is awesome. So what this does is, it's just, as soon as we're gonna wire this to where I'm gonna key on the rig, nothing's gonna be pumping, but once it turns over and starts, I'm gonna have a voltage sensitive relay that will turn on a bunch of different systems once it sees voltage above 13.3 volts. So the reason I want to do that is so that if the battery runs down over a few weeks and I key it on to try to turn it over, I don't want that intercooler pump to be pumping yet. I want it to already be running and charging, and then once that voltage sensitive relay sees the voltage go above 13.3 volts, that means that the alternator's working, and then it'll tell these different systems to turn on. Again, that's something that you won't see in a lot of builds, but I've done a few of these now, and that's something that I've always thought would be valuable, to have like fans and like pumps and stuff turn on after the vehicle's running instead of just whenever you key it on. So it's pumping water, pumping coolant through this, the intercooler, and then it goes through a radiator up here. Ideally, I would love to have a reservoir. I didn't have a reservoir on the TJ, and it never got hot off-road, but my intake air temps would go up quite a bit when I was on the freeway. This is gonna see like 0 freeway unless I'm in Moab and I'm just going to a trail or something. But in any case, this intercooler is like 2/3 bigger than what my old one was, so I don't think I'm gonna need a reservoir. I think that this is gonna work just fine. So this gives us the ability to remotely cool a small intercooler and actually package an intercooler into a tiny engine bay like this. So I know that this looks completely crammed and it's gonna get worse, but we're able to package like V8 level power into an engine bay that is extremely tiny. So we're taking advantage of like as much modern tech as we can to make this scoot instead of have it struggle to get up hills.
Oh boy. Here it is. 6'1", around 220-ish, depending on if it's the holidays or not. And you can see how I fit in here. It's not bad, actually. I'm glad that I moved the seats in a little bit, so I'll probably be like shoulder to shoulder with whoever's next to me, but that's just samurai life. The door is a little cozy, but that's going to be winter samurai, not summer samurai, so hopefully when I'm at places that are dry and deserty, I'll just not have a door, and this will be way more comfortable in here. Anyway, I gotta know. So I had mentioned that I was talking about doing ducting in the hood. Do you want to see that? It's so tempting to just blow past that, get this thing running, driving. I want to get it to the hammers. So would you be interested in ducting? I would do some sort of a fiberglass channel in that. And then the other thing, so many of you have asked me to do rear steer on this that it's extremely tempting. I found a deal on the parts I would need on Marketplace to convert the rear into a steer axle, because The front and rear axle housings are basically the exact same, so I wouldn't have to change the housing. I would just unbolt a set of steer knuckles and bolt them in place of the solid, I don't know, what'd you call it? Normal knuckles, whatever the rear knuckles would be called, and then mount a ram and, you know, pump and stuff. So it's extremely tempting. Let me know in the comments. Do you want to see rear steer still? And do you want to see me duct this? So I'm thinking if we can get this running, driving the next couple weeks, we'll take it to King of the Hammers and whatnot, and then whenever we get back, we'll use this, but we'll consider taking a week and doing a rear steer conversion if that's something that you guys want to see. Thank you so much for watching. I know this one's a short one. The next one is going to be a gigantic video, and fingers crossed we actually get to drive this for the first time.